Dr. Rudolph, I noticed the video link on the Board of Trustees meeting page has been unlinked for tonight.
The meeting is already being recorded.
It's back. I refreshed it. Maybe it was a cached version.
I think we're just waiting on Chris to, he's co-hosted, so we're just waiting on him.
You want us to mute ourselves unless we're talking during the meeting?
No, we should be fine at this point. So it looks like we're ready to go.
Let me know when we're ready and I'll.
We're ready.
Oh, and I don't have my flag. Ellen, we're gonna have to rely on you. Oh, wait, no, I do. Okay, we're ready? Okay, good evening, everyone. At 6:47 p.m., I'd like to call the November 17th, 2022 meeting of the Mountain View Wisman School District Board of Trustees to order. Will everyone please say the pledge? I pledge allegiance to the flag in the United States of America
and to
the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty
and
justice for all. Thank you, everyone. May I have roll call, please?
Devin Conley.
Ellen Wheeler.
Let's change.
Laura Berman.
And I'm Laura Blakely. Let the record reflect that all 5 trustees are present. The next item is approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
And Ms. Fichard, were you going to make a comment about one of the items being modified?
Yes, thank you very much. I did want to bring to your attention this evening that on the consent agenda, item G, resolution for lactation breaks has been updated with an additional option included in that resolution. Paper copies have been included for each of you in your packets tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm sorry, Trustee Wheeler made the motion and Trustee Conley second. Oh. Other way around?
Yeah.
Okay. Did anyone have any comments on this, or if not?
Isn't this the agenda, not the consent agenda?
Yeah.
This is approval of the agenda.
Approval of the agenda. So all in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay, on a motion made by Trustee Conley, seconded by Trustee Wheeler, the agenda with the updated item G was approved unanimously.
And President Blakely, I think it'd be worth explaining to anyone who's watching why we're all at home instead of in the district office. You know, we all know that there was some technical difficulty at the office, so we all, you know, went back to our own spaces. But, you know, that's the reason we're all, you know, at home.
Technical difficulties, we're going old school, back to the old-fashioned Zoom. So we appreciate everyone's patience this evening for that. We've all been to the district office and now we're back in our home offices. Okay, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Trustee Chang?
Yes, thank you. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda, but with one item removed for discussion, the TechSmart contract. So a motion to approve the consent agenda with the TechSmart removed for discussion.
Second.
Okay, and that's under contracts. Okay. Were there any, before we vote, were there any members of the public wishing to comment on this item? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom. It looks like one, but I think that might be you, Trustee Chang. You still have your hand up. Oh, there it went down. Okay. I don't see any. So everyone who is in favor of the motion made by Trustee Chang and seconded by Trustee Wheeler, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay. Thank you. So the motion made by Trustee Chang and approved by Trustee Wheeler was approved unanimously. And then I believe we turn to the TechSmart contract for discussion. I'm trying to see which that is item. It's under contracts, which is C1, and it is the last contract in the package. So Trustee Chang, it sounds like you had comments that you wanted to make on this.
Oh, thank you. I recommend to the board its approval. I'll be voting for it. I just wanted to remind the board that and this is one of our primary providers for our district's instruction on computer science, which I'm excited and welcome. TechSmart came to our district as a kind of a grant through the Education Foundation. I believe Google assisted with that as well. So as initially funded through outside source, it didn't go through a traditional curriculum review process of bringing it. We have a lot of parents and people in our community who are the world experts in computer science, and a traditional curriculum process would have brought in the community to help us pick our computer science curriculum. This was brought in as a grant, and then has kind of rolled over into district funding. So I welcome us to improve this, approve funding TechSmart, and appreciate that we have computer science in our district. And we'll just look forward to the board in the future viewing computer science as a regular curriculum adoption process involving the expertise of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Chang. That's just a comment about being part of the regular curriculum adoption process. Is that correct?
Yes, which this is not, but I will be voting for this item.
Okay. Did any other trustees have any clarifying questions about this contract? Were there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item this evening? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom, or if you're on the phone, press *9. Sorry, my computer is not showing me the hands raised, but I don't see any. So were there any additional comments on this item? If not, may I have a motion?
Motion to approve the TechSmart contract.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hand or say aye.
Aye.
Okay, on a motion made by Trustee Chang, seconded by Trustee Wheeler, the TechSmart contract is approved unanimously. Thank you, everyone. We will now turn to item 3 on the agenda, communications. Are there any members of employee organizations here this evening wishing to address the board? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 if you are participating by phone. Okay, I am not seeing any raised hands, so we will move along to district committees. If there are any members here wishing to address the board on district committees, will you please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 if you are participating in Zoom by phone? Okay, I am not seeing any. So item 3C is superintendent comments. Dr. Rudolph.
Yep, I'll keep it just real quick. So a lot of our school sites have been doing Walden West, and we have unfortunately had a couple kids who caught COVID or tested positive for COVID once they were there. So just want to remind everybody that kits went out to staff and students, and that we are going to send a reminder out, but please make sure it's a big gathering time that you have everyone test right before they come back. We don't have the same testing program that we had before, but we know that people are yearning to gather in larger groups than what they normally do. And so we just want to encourage people to use those test kits. And there are 2 in every single kit, I believe, from the ones that we sent home. And just want to remind people, because it is Thanksgiving coming up, that tomorrow there will be no community check-in. I'm assuming that most people who are traveling are either getting ready to travel or are already traveling. So want to wish everybody a safe and wonderful Thanksgiving, but also please be safe while you're traveling. Always wash your hands, wear your mask, and watch your distance just in case, or at least go get boosted. So those are my quick updates.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. And I know the board seconds that we hope everyone has a fabulous Thanksgiving break. Okay, we will move along to community comments now. This is the time reserved for community members to address the board on items that are not on the agenda. The board and administration welcome this opportunity to listen. However, in compliance with the Brown Act, the board is not permitted to take action on non-agenda items. If you would like to speak on an item that is not on the agenda this evening, will you please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 if you are participating by phone? Okay, I do not see any hands raised. So we will move along then to item 5A, it's review and action. And item A is the school plans for student achievement. And are Ms. Degar and Ms. Bauer presenting on this evening? Or
Yes, I will present.
Okay.
A
Thank
quick
you.
introduction.
Welcome.
Thank you. So good evening, trustees. I'm here to present our site's school plans for student achievement. Our principals have been working very hard on these plans in collaboration with their school site councils, their staff, and their English Learner Advisory Committee members. Plans were posted on the district website as of October 24th for review by you as well as the public. And several of you have met with principals to learn more about their individual plans. The principals are here tonight to answer any additional questions you may have, but I'm asking that you do approve the school plans for student achievement as presented. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bauer. Trustees, were there any clarifying questions that you would like to ask about the site plans? Trustee Conley.
Thank you, President Blakely. I just had a quick question. Ms. Bauer, the iReady showed up as a component in a lot of the plans based on research around having 45 minutes per subject per week for students. Is that, I haven't been able to read this study in depth. Is that in the classroom or is that outside of the classroom? Does it matter based on the study?
My understanding is it doesn't matter. It's 45 minutes additional practice for students because the way the program works, it tailors the lessons for the students. But it is important that teachers are checking student progress because sometimes they can't get stuck.
Okay, thank you.
Did any other trustees have clarifying questions on the site plans or the site plan process? Okay, I am not seeing any, thank you. So we will open it up to comments from members of the public. If there are any members of the public wishing to address the board on the site plan process or any of the site plans, will you please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 if you are participating by phone? I don't see any hands raised, so we will come back to the trustees. Trustees, do you have comments? I have a few, but maybe others of you would like to chime in first. Trustee Conley.
Thank you, President Blakely. Trustee Berman and I did some interviews together of principals, and this is one of the best experiences being a trustee, I think, getting to have access to the site plans ahead of time and then getting to hear from the principals in depth about the implementation of their site plans, the different things they're excited about for the year, and being able to ask questions and really examine what's going on at the school level. I know this is my hobby horse, I'm on it all the time, but the school site plans are where our strategic plan, our LCAP, all of our big goals and data actually, the rubber meets the road. It's where those things get addressed at the school site level. And so I think this is a key document for us And I really appreciate the process that we have in place now to be able to review it. And all of the hard work that the principals and school site councils put into it.
Hear, hear. Totally agree. I met with about half of the principals. I wish time would have permitted to meet with all of them. It's a lot, as you know. I mean, you're telling me, right? Or I'm telling you, to prepare these. And there's 11, we have 11 schools. Each school has their own. They're all, like 50 pages long. And I know there's a whole process of meetings that the principals and the site councils, a series of meetings that they worked on to prepare and refine these. And then to review them. And so it took me about a week or a week plus to just try to go through them. And I like to kind of compare them before I start the meeting. So I'm glad we had a long time. And I wish I would have had a chance to speak with everyone. But I learned a lot. And a couple of things I just wanted to comment. And I think to sort of frame the process, I sort of had some ahas, and I think the principals that I met with earlier were kind of, unfortunately, my guinea pigs. But I was curious about a couple of things. And so I think in the future, framing it might be helpful. The site plans, for those of you who haven't looked at them, track our strategic goals. And goal 1 is around language arts. Goal 2 is around math. Goal 3 is around academic achievement for our language learners. Goal 4 is around social emotional health and wellness. And goal 5 is around an inclusive and welcoming culture. And for the first 2, the sort of more academic goals, the language arts and math, those are broken into 2 subsets. One is around the scores, the CASP scores, and then the other is around the annual typical growth. And I was curious as to, and then they break it out for subgroups, right? SEDs, students with disabilities, English only, Latinx, Asian, white, and language learner students. And I was really curious, why the percentages bounced around in terms of what the increases were. And you, I think, explained this to me, Ms. Bauer, but basically what most of the process most of the schools landed on was looking at the data of who didn't achieve proficient level, what percentages of students that was in the subgroup, and then increase in taking 10% of that. So you're basically reducing it by 10%, which is why the numbers were all different. When I was on site councils back in the day, these were pretty much uniform across the board. So they were looking for the similar growth across every subgroup, with a little bit of focus on language learners, and at the time of below basic, far below basic people, bumping those up. But I think this is helpful. And I just think framing that would have been helpful, at least for me. So I like that approach though. So we're sort of getting steady improvement. Another aha that I had, because I was looking at the CASP score data, we only test 4th and 8th graders. And so we've all been hearing all this stuff on the radio and the TV and reading in the newspapers about how there was learning loss and students declined. But actually, this data, when we were comparing the CASP scores, they were looking at a completely different group of students that was tested in 2019. And so there has been some decline, but some of that is, it's a completely different group of students. So I think next year, when we have year-over-year data, that will probably be more helpful of a benchmark in terms of what the student population at a given school is doing.
Right. And I'll just to clarify, we test 3rd through 8th grade on CASP. All students in 3rd through 8th grade.
Okay, thank you.
5th graders and 8th graders then take a separate science test.
Science. Okay. So my confusion.
But you are correct. It's hard to look at data right now. We don't have year-over-year cohort, which is what we've had in the past. So you're definitely correct in that. It'll be easier next year to monitor how our kids are doing.
Thank you. Great. That's helpful. And the other thing I was going to say is, well, I've got 2 more things. I'm sorry if I'm doing a monologue here this evening. On the 1 year's growth, or the annual typical growth, we'd look for 1 year's growth. One of our goals is every student makes 1 year's academic growth from wherever it is that they're starting. And that's the place where I'm wondering, like, why are we using this kind of 10% figure of the people that didn't meet it last year? Like, I would hope, and I'm sure everybody wants to exceed those goals. We're trying to do something that's measurable and attainable, but is it real? And this is maybe a question, overarching question. Is it realistic to ask for more than just 10% of the kids that didn't achieve it the prior year to achieve it this year?
It could be. I think that's where we've always set kind of our baseline, is that we always want to have an increase of 10%. When we talk about students meeting annual typical growth or meeting 1 year's growth, some meet more than that, right? Some will make more than 1 year's growth, which is great, and some won't. But I mean, it's something we could consider, but we've tried to keep a baseline for, we're always shooting to make a 10% gain across the board in what we're looking at. And then we're always like thrilled and happy if we have a much higher growth than that, but we're trying to also keep it attainable.
Okay, well, yes, I understand that. I know when we first set those goals, we said 90% of the kids in 5th grade would, well, I guess that was the language learners would be language qualified, but okay.
If I can add something to what Ms. Bauer was saying, when we look at them overall, it's overall 10%, and then subgroup overall 10% too, as a standard benchmark. But when we break it down by students, so we may see different 122% growth on average. If we break it down by student at that granular level of grade level and student, it's more. So some kids may make 120%, some may make 150% of their growth.
Okay. Thank you. I just would love to get all of our kids proficient. And so if we're chiseling away at it. I mean, it's great to chisel away at it, but, and thank you. The last thing I was going to say is, in talking to all the principals, like about the strategies, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy with the site plans, is they each talk about what strategies are being implemented at their school in order to achieve these goals. There weren't a lot of new things this year, but kind of across the board, they all talked about implementing strategies like PSYOP and some of the other things with more fidelity, and doing these data cycles where they're really coming back and looking at the data and focusing on the groups, and, for RTI, moving the groups around, but really trying to do it with fidelity and just more adherence to the process. And I'm hopeful that will work. I think it will. And it's because, if you just say you're doing all this stuff, but you're not really doing it, it sounds like sometimes in some years, and in part because of COVID, we were really clicking along before. And then, COVID kind of threw a curveball to all of us. But I was pleased to hear that kind of across the board that all the principals were doing that, and we're feeling like they were getting a lot out of the meetings with their staff and the professional development. And so I'm optimistic that it's going to be a good year. Thank you to everybody. Trustee Conley.
Thank you, President Blakely. I agree with a lot of your comments. I think we're, sort of returning this year to a very intense academic focus that last year was a little bit skewed or taken off course because of the response, all of the testing that had to be done at school, all of the absences that students had. The chronic absenteeism this year so far, when I asked principals, seems to be going down a little bit. But I wanted to comment on what you were discussing around the iReady schoolers. So there's 2 different iReady goals that each student has. There's the annual typical growth, and then there's also what's called a stretch goal or stretch growth. And that stretch growth is the amount for students who are not on grade level. It is the amount that they need to grow that year to begin to close the gap to get to proficiency. So it's not in our site plans yet, but I am curious about, is that something that we want to start focusing on, that our students who are proficient or above make at least 1 year annual growth, but our students who are not yet proficient are meeting their stretch goal each year, because that is how we're going to get them to proficiency.
Ms. Bauer, Ms. Dagger, do you have any thoughts about that?
So if
Or
I could just,
Dr. Rudolph?
yep, let me just chime in. So we're going to be presenting later on a sort of a correlation that we're doing with iReady as well as to CAS, and then also talking about growth. And so I think some of these are more apt because you're really diving into the iReady conversation. So, I know, Trustee Conley, you may or may not be there, but the tentative date is the second meeting in January. And so I think that's a great time for you to have that conversation after we see where kids are from a growth standpoint, and as well as where kids are from performance thus far. It would seem like, and then that, and then as we head into, I know we normally do another retreat right after that. And that may be the opportunity to talk about whether or not you want to update the goal for the upcoming year to include anything else.
Okay, thank you. Trustee Berman.
So I'll just quickly add that I definitely agree with the comments that have been shared, and I just want to thank the principals and Ms. Bauer and Ms. Daggar for joining us in the meeting. I know that a Principal's Day is always jam-packed, so I appreciate it in every moment that was spent with us. And for the support that's given to the principals in putting these plans together. One of the things that came up a few times was around, the metric that's being used for some of the goals, and sometimes it's tied to the LCAP survey. And so I think an opportunity is to continue to support our principals with identifying what goals that really align to some of the work that they want to do, so we can get some clear connections between some of those actions and where we'll see the outcomes improve. So I think that clarity would be really helpful. So thank you so much. That's the last thing I wanted to add.
Thanks. And Trustee Chang, go ahead.
Thank you. Just a brief comment, but led in first a question about on one of the reports for Castro Elementary on the section on parent involvement had the section about ways parents are involved in. Does Castro Elementary have an active PTA at this moment?
They do. I asked Principal Kearns when we talked about that when I met with her. Trustee Berman, do you have more color on that? Oh. They do have a PTA. She's looking to, she told me that she's looking to increase the parent membership, but that she's getting some very good parent involvement in some of the other activities that they're doing. And Principal Kearns, please unmute yourself.
Good evening, everybody. Can you all hear me? Just thumbs up it. Great. Sorry, I'm in the middle of peeling shrimp right now too and listening, cooking dinner for the family. But yeah, so we do have a PTA. It was revived last year. We do have some former parents that have taken on the role of revamping our PTA, and we have a board, and we had our first actual real PTA association meeting last night. We had a good amount of attendance, and we have some current parents of some of our kindergarten students, some of our second grade, third grade, even fourth and fifth grade students that are interested in helping to lead our PTA. So we are definitely in the process of revamping it, and I'm really excited to see how much parent participation that we are starting to gain momentum with this year.
That's terrific news. Thank you for sharing.
And thank you. That is wonderful news. And leading into the comment of when I was looking at when I know that in the Castro in the past, in trying to recruit parents to be involved in PTA, like communication is sometimes a challenge. And I was looking at the school websites for the parent participation section, and they're all in English, and at all the schools, including Castro. And I recognize on the website, it's very difficult to translate all elements of the website. But I like the parent involvement part of the school action plans. And I think that one thing that could help them succeed in their goals for parent involvement would be to have at Castro parts involving parents to be in Spanish as well as in English. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Chang. I know that there's a lot of outreach that is in Spanish at Castro and some of our other schools as well. I mean, we have very active ELAC. Principal Kearns.
Yeah, so a lot of our outreach does take place outside of the website as well. Our wonderful SCEFs are always calling families, texting families, putting out flyers. Anytime we have any event that could involve parent participation, we are outreaching in that way. Just because a website is not very personal, but a phone call or a text goes a long way in getting our parents to come to the site.
Thank you to the SCEFs at Castro and to all of our other schools. They're an integral part of our community. And I think Dr. Rudolph was the instigator of those when he first came onto the district. And it's made a lot of difference in the lives of many of our families. So thank you. And I was just going to comment on the site plans. I know I was asking all the questions about the academic pieces, and but you know, I like the language learner goals in general. It sounds like, you know, SIAP is a big piece of that, and fidelity to it, and really, you know, these cycles where they're going back and looking at the data and working in small groups with the principals. And the small group instruction too is something that I think every single principal said was super helpful to work with their targeted group. So I'm glad that we have the ability to do that, both through RTI and through other resources. And the social emotional health and wellness is definitely important, and that was addressed in all the plans. And then again, Trustee Chang pointed out about the inclusive and welcoming culture and getting more parent involvement. And I know there was more parent involvement at a number of the schools, and several of the principals commented on the great feedback they were getting about the sort of more targeted parent university, like they're doing custom events at their school in addition to the district-wide one. So that's all been well received. So thank you to all the site councils and all the principals, and, you know, good luck executing these. We're keeping our fingers crossed that things continue to go well, and that later in January, when we look at that iReady data, it will be instructive and help show that we're attaining the progress that you've mapped out in the plans. Did anybody else have any other comments, or can I have a motion to approve the site plans?
I make a motion to approve the site plans as presented.
I'll second the motion. All in favor, please raise your hand or say aye. Okay. Aye. Thank you. On a motion made by Trustee Conley and seconded by Trustee Blakely, the site plans are unanimously approved, not improved. Thanks, everyone. Okay. We'll now move along to item 6, which is review and discussion. And the first item A on there is the wellness policy annual goals progress report. And I believe Health and Wellness Coordinator Brian White is presenting, or perhaps Ms. Jinbo. Or
yep.
is this just a report? Okay, great.
Yeah, we are co-presenting. Let me share my screen. We are trying to keep it brief. Well, I might have to hand it off to Coordinator White. I just got a new laptop and it's not letting me share.
You may need to be a co-host for that. I don't know if you can make her a co-host.
Yeah, I am. It's asking me to set my settings. Oh. It's my settings. Well, you have a paper copy of the slides, and the progress report was attached to the board agenda. Mm-hmm. So it's a pleasure to be with you all again with Coordinator White, and we will try to keep it brief because this is a summary of the progress report. So, of course, as always, we align our work with the strategic plan, and this evening's focus is with Goal 2, Objective 2A, equitably and effectively supporting positive student behavior. And if you recall, last year we renewed and updated our wellness policy. And as part of that renewal, we added annual goals. And the progress report that today is our first progress report We will have another at trimester 2 and then a final report at the end of the year. So what we've done also this evening is added the CHAC services data as what was requested last month to provide you an update on that information as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Coordinator White to give you a brief summary of our progress report.
All right, thank you, Director Genbo. And I can try and share the slides. I can try and share my screen if you would like me to do that. I'm going to go ahead and give it a shot really quick at the risk of taking some time. So let's see. Let's see if I can do this on the fly. You hear any barking in the background or children noises? It is bedtime in the White household, so apologies for any extra noise. Okay, can everybody see that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so I want to start just by, again, just connecting our presentation to our strategic plan. So it's goal 2, objective 2A, equitably and effectively supporting positive student behavior. And then our strategic initiative here is to implement a whole school, whole community, whole child model. And on this slide, you can see our overall wellness goals. And so our progress report tonight is focusing really on nutrition promotion and nutrition education, and then subsequent progress reports will elaborate on the data that we get and hit on additional wellness policy goals. So I want to briefly go over our trimester 1 data, what we have so far. We want to update you on our attendance, and good news is that our attendance rates continue to be slightly improved from the 21-22 school year. As you can see for October, which is the most recent month that we pulled data, it's pretty much spot on, and even better for August and September. Looking at our behavior incidents, this chart shows you all of the different locations that behavior incidents have been reported. And as you can see, most of our behavior incidents take place outside of the classroom, particularly on the blacktop and on the playing field, and about 35% of our incidents being classroom based. So zeroing down to our wellness policy annual goals progress report. So this trimester, I was able to connect with all of our schools, and my focus during those site visits focused on the first 2 goals, which is nutrition promotion and nutrition education. So the first goal, nutrition promotion, 100% of schools will utilize the Smart Snacks reference checklist when planning food outside of the food services program. The Smart Snacks checklist is a tool that schools can use, that PTAs and site staff can use to plan food that is served during the school day to make sure that it meets federal nutrition standards. So by partially in place, it's an awareness level. So we have 9 of our 11 schools have awareness of that Smart Snacks checklist, and they know what it is. And then we have 2 of our 11 schools are actively implementing that checklist where they've actually used that. So again, this is something that we're making progress on towards, throughout the entire year. So so we're seeing forward momentum there. And then nutrition education, that's providing general nutrition education through district and school-wide parent communication. All 11 of our schools have some level of nutrition education and information that students and parents have access to. And our district has a website, a nutrition website that has a lot of great information that Dr. Austin or Director Austin has put together. And so the written board report that Director Jimbo and I produced goes into detail on those 2 goal areas. We also want to give you a mental health services update as requested. And again, the written report goes into more detail. But we have mental health services provided to students through 2 partnership organizations. That's Community Health Awareness Council and Pacific Clinics. So currently about 4% of our elementary students and almost 4% of our middle school students are receiving services. As of November 8th, 100% of referrals have been assigned to clinicians, and all of our elementary students are accessing direct SDL instruction They've TAC has had a point of contact with all of our elementary students through their direct programs. And then as of November 8th, CHAC clinicians reported that they were not, CHAC reported that they were not yet at capacity, so no wait list as of November 8th. Now, Director Jimbo and I are working with site principals and the CHAC director to problem solve and mitigate, in the case there are wait lists, we're working with CHAC to problem solve and mitigate any potential wait list, should they arise. And then we have Pacific Clinics. So Pacific Clinics is the provider of our school link services, and that happens at Castro, Crittenden, Graham, Mauna Loma, and Barracoff. And so currently we have 26 elementary students receiving services, and we have 20 students in middle school receiving services. Now, those services through Pacific Clinics cover a broader range of services that may include site-based therapy, it may include parent support, it may include in-home support, so the services cover a pretty broad range there. So that is our current data. And I want to move on to talking about trimester 1 activities. We have our health and wellness committee. We've had 2 really great meetings so far. We've gotten a lot of stakeholder feedback related to nutrition promotion and education goals. So we've had really productive meetings and well-attended meetings with the committee so far. We also have the Castro Elementary Wellness Center. That's first year of full operation. And then we have the coordination of services team that is trialing at Castro. And so we're refining that process at Castro, and we've just moved into a phase of getting teacher feedback there. We've also had community engagement and outreach activities. I want to thank the trustees who were able to attend the September 24th health fair. It's very well attended, and we're really proud of the good work that we were able to do in the community, getting vaccines out there and getting families needed supplies. We also did a campaign in September called All the Feels that was in alignment with Suicide Prevention Month, and all students in Mountain View had some kind of connection with that, either through the books that we were providing to classrooms or through the wristbands that we gave to, or the keychains that we gave to middle school. And then finally, we had in October, Director Jimbo and I presented at Parent U, and we presented on social emotional learning at home and at school, which was really well attended, and we're really excited to see the number of parents that we had involved there. So policy goals and our progress monitoring activities. So what we're going to be doing is those site visits are going to continue throughout the school year. And as we measure our progress towards the goals that were established last year, it's important to note that our aim this year is to build awareness of these goals versus enforcement mechanisms. So our progress is awareness, and that's what we're really focusing on. Our current mental health services activities. So we have a weekly check-in meeting with our CHAC director. And again, we're continuing to monitor clinician capacity and any emerging wait lists. And then we're continuing discussions on maximizing clinician time through developing dyads, which are just a small group of 2 students and a therapist, a clinician, and small groups with caseloads. So we want to be strategic in ensuring that every child that needs CHAC services are able to receive them. And then we get weekly referral and capacity updates from Pacific Clinics, and we're establishing a monthly check-in meeting with Pacific Clinics director as well. We also have our Sown to Grow implementation, which we presented on last month. Again, the board report goes into some more detail on this, but back in October, we had our soft implementation. So those sites that had participated in the trial back in spring 2022, they were able to begin implementing the program at that time. And then tomorrow is the date that we are targeting for all elementary teachers to have implemented at least one student emotional check-in and feedback loop. We also have our middle schools that they have been meeting with site leadership teams to discuss Sown to Grow and to develop their trials. And then they've also been attending some Sown to Grow trainings as well. So movement on both elementary and middle school for Sown to Grow. And then of course, I will continue to support school sites with implementation and respond to questions in partnership with Sown to Grow staff. And that'll include sharing data about usage with principals and being available to troubleshoot anything that comes up as we get full implementation underway. And then finally, I want to share some considerations with you. Wellness policy annual goals are something that are new to our district this year. So there's been a lot of education with principals and with teachers and just about what wellness policy annual goals are. And the neat thing about wellness policy is it's a pretty broad topic. And when people really dig into what that is, they get excited about it. And so with the excitement, we also want to temper that with remembering that implementation of these new initiatives takes training and it takes time. And the other thing about wellness goals is it is really intertwined with a lot of different initiatives. So continued growth in our capacity, is going to really in this capacity is really going to require the mindset of understanding how wellness and SEL and other things are interrelated, and that will continue throughout the strategic plan timeline. And so with that, I will hand it back over to Director Genbo to discuss next steps.
So under the umbrella of health and wellness and our wellness policy, we do have quite a few next steps that will continue throughout the year. Trimester 2 site visits will focus on physical activity goals, annual goals, as well as other school-based activities, annual goals. We do want to increase the visibility and use of the Smart Snacks checklist and nutrition education materials. We anticipate regular incorporation of nutrition content in health and wellness communications with schools and parents. Exploration of development of awareness campaigns. So we're going to be working towards developing our nutrition promotion campaign and mental health awareness campaigns for the spring semester. And again, we'll continue with Sown to Grow implementation and support and data review, and we'll very much looking forward to what kind of data we're going to see in at the end of trimester 2. And as our SEL work group gets up and running, we're definitely looking forward to expanding the work that we started last year with our teachers and admin on SEL competencies and guidance for our teachers. We will again continue regular check-ins with CHAC and Pacific clinics, and final annual goals report will be presented to the board prior to June 30th, 2022. And with that, we will hand it back to you, trustees.
Thank you very much to both of you for the update. I'm glad to see the progress that has been taking place. Trustees, did anybody have any clarifying questions about the presentation? Trustee Berman.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I'm wondering with students that get a referral for CHAC, I know there's a process for waiting to receive parent consent. Do we have students that don't receive parent consent to receive services from CHAC, or is it typical that parents are signing to have their student get support?
So it's typical to get the consent, and it's twofold. We need consent to be able to release the information to CHAC, and then we also need consent as part of that referral. CHAC needs the consent to be able to contact the family and exchange information.
So it sounds like this hasn't been an issue at all with families.
What I think might take some time is actually obtaining the consent, obtaining the signature, but we cannot pass along a referral to CHAC without that consent.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And Trustee Chang, you had your hand up a moment ago. Did you have a question?
Oh yes, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. On the chart where it shows the there was like a list of incidences. It's in the digital one. For trustees, I don't believe it's in the paper one. It's the behavior incidents by type. Is that like a track of over 1 year, or what's the time period for that?
Sure, that's just the school year so far. So it's just the school year. And
how is this data collected? Like in particular, like the question on bullying, things like that. Is there a form that sites fill out and then this data is gathered, or like particularly for bullying? How did we collect this data for the district?
Go ahead.
I can tell you that I think Director Genbo can talk more specifically about bullying, but the data for the district is collected through our student information system. So whenever there's an incident, the heiress or the assistant principal or principal, whoever's entering in that information, is required to select a location.
So any description of the incident is placed into our PowerSchool, our student information system.
So this is from PowerSchool, this chart. I forgot that. Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions, trustees? Okay, are there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom or press *9 if you, oh, we don't have anybody on the phone anymore. Okay, I don't see any. So trustees, I'm sure you have things to comment. I just have one brief comment. I kept looking for a link to the Smart Snacks checklist, and I meant to write in and ask for a copy of that, but I'd love to see if that can be linked onto into the presentation that's on the website or something. I'd love to take a look at that. Thank
Absolutely.
you. Comments, trustees? Trustee Chang?
Thank you. So excited that we're how often wellness is coming up this year, and with this report. And thank you, Director Jimbo, and thank you, Coordinator White. Like what we measure and pay attention to grows. So like I think our social emotional health in our district will grow, and there's reports like this and the attention given. Two comments. One is the PowerSchool data collection report on the chart. I wonder if that's like the best way, if indeed that is the best way to collect a pulse of how much those incidents are happening. Because when you look at those numbers, like I know that often when something happens in a school site, it may be resolved many steps before it ever gets entered into PowerSchool. And because for a district our size, for a year, on bullying, the chart shows less than 15 cases. That sounds low for a year for a school district, a K-8 school district. So I think that if we rely on that, if we rely on that as a metric, we may be underestimating and then under resourcing our response to situations like bullying. So just wondering, in the past, we as a board, the question that come up before about if bullying gets reported, how do we keep track of that number, and how does that number get reported to the board? That was something that was discussed in the past. And PowerSchool as a presentation to us may still not give the board the number that really is the number of how many bullying cases there are in a year in the district. And just the last one, in past board meetings, a few board members had mentioned concern about teacher wellness. And I think that as a future growth, and again, we can only take so much. Part of wellness is also learning to say no and learning how much you can put on your plate. And we have so much on our plate to take care of our kids, but also, there's all these reports of teachers across the nation expressing burnout, leaving the profession, and all kinds of things tied to wellness. So it's hard for me to say we take on one more thing when part of wellness is to learn to prioritize, but teacher wellness is something that has been mentioned in the past. And thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Chang. I don't know if you had any comments, Director Jimbo, or no, you were nodding. Okay.
Oh, Ms. Vickyard had shared one of the previous board meetings about exploring resources for teacher wellness. So I'm nodding that has come up in the past, and it continues to be worked on.
Thank you. We're all grateful. Trustee Berman.
I just wanted to celebrate for a moment that we don't have any wait lists for students wishing to see someone from CHAC. I think that's truly, truly remarkable that when we have a student that needs to speak with someone, we figure out how to make it work and make sure they get the support that they need. So I'm really incredibly proud of that. I was also thinking about, with regard to this data, something that would be really helpful is to maybe see it broken down a little bit more, maybe elementary versus middle school, because it's so, behaviors are so different and needs are so different. In some respect, maybe by school, but definitely between elementary and middle school, I think would be really helpful. I was also impressed with how many students at the Wellness Center are self-referring. So I think that really speaks to an awareness of that desire to self-regulate their emotions and wanting to be present in school and knowing how to reach out for support, which is where we want students to be. I've been hearing so much about the stigma around, and we've all known this, the stigma around mental health, right? And there's stigma with students, and they're more aware of it as they get older. And there's definitely stigma with the adults as well, and the adults in children's lives. So I wanted to mention that because I think it's such an important thing for us to keep in mind, because I think as kids get a little older and more aware of other students and their own feelings and the actions that they're taking, stigma can really keep kids from getting the help that they need. So it's amazing to have this incredible resource in one of our schools. And the more that we can keep, encouraging our students to use it and, reduce that barrier, that stigma, really is in their lives as they grow older, I think we will all be better for it. So thank you for the work and for the report. And I'm looking forward to seeing more data in the future.
Thank you.
Trustee Conley.
Thank you, President Blakely. And I agree. Thank you for the presentation tonight. And it's just a delight to get trimester updates on this now, and that it's part of the work going forward. So I'm really glad it's a focus. As Trustee Chang was discussing, I brought up teacher wellness the last time we were kind of talking about this, and Acknowledged Alliance is one example of an organization that is working with supporting teachers, staff, admins, and district office personnel. But there are others, so I'm not wedded to a specific one, but that's one that Sunnyvale is using. So I, believe that the more we can help our teachers self-regulate and have coping skills for what has been a really hard few years and heal, the more they can help their students as well. But I'm also really thrilled that the incident data, behavior incident data is in here, because thinking to the equity committee, which I serve on right now, when we're talking about equity and we look at discipline policies, but we also look at if we reach the point where we talk about restorative justice or restorative practices, that discipline, that incident data is going to be really important in informing how we approach restorative practices with students, and rather than kind of a harsher discipline approach.
Thank you, Trustee Conley. I just wanted to chime in also in prior years, and from when my kids were in school, and even when I first was on the board, I think a lot of these areas, the nutrition in particular, it was kind of haphazard. Some schools had a healthy snacks program, others didn't. We weren't looking at it holistically district-wide. And so I'm really grateful that we have both of you on our staff, and that we have the Health and Wellness Committee, helping with the work, and that, speaking of equity, that similar things are being rolled out to all the schools, and, no school left behind, if you will. So, and I'm also really excited about the Sown to Grow implementation and getting the kids to talk, just more uniform emphasis on social emotional wellness. Because I think if we can get kids to identify, Trustee Berman talked about the stigma, that to, identify their feelings of sadness or frustration or anxiety, they can talk about it, they can get help before things get, to a crisis stage. And that's good for all of us. So thank you for all the work that you are doing to lead this effort. Did anybody else have anything? Thank you. I think we're ready to move on unless anybody else had anything else. So I hope you enjoy your holiday breaks. Thanks for the report and all the time you spend on this. The next item on the agenda is 6B, the future agenda item process. And I believe Dr. Rudolph is presenting on that.
Yes, ma'am. So the board brought up the request for us to look at the future item agenda process. Over the course of my time working with the board, this has sort of evolved. And then looking at different policies that were included, not only from neighboring districts, but also sort of some that are outside of the district, and then looking at CSBA policies. We've actually determined that we have some conflicting interest in the policy. So for instance, the board policy states that the president is the person who sets the agenda, which is the person elected by the board. However, the secondary process says that even though the president has the authority to determine, which is actually how CSBA listed, we sort of inadvertently stripped the power of setting the agenda from the president and put it in sort of this process that we're using now, which is I think the second or third iteration since I've been there. And in looking at it and thinking about sort of the conversations that have sort of occurred over time, I think, this board is able to function and discuss sort of what direction they want. And there isn't as many conflicts as there may have been in the past. But also I think that there's the request that I'm hearing is that in the event that an item doesn't get placed on an agenda, that there should be some type of recourse for some type of appeal process. And CSBA actually has one identified, as well as a couple other districts. And so what staff is proposing is that we remove the second part of the future board, or the placing of items on the agenda, and replace it with the appeal process. So essentially the way that it will function is that if a trustee would like something placed on an agenda, that they would reach out to the board president. Obviously the board president and I talk about the item, but it's really a conversation between two electeds. The board president will confer with me about where we can place the item on, or whether or not it needs to go on. And in the event that the board president decides, no, it's not something that we want to cover at this time, that we have an appeal process that will be used for items for future agenda. What that essentially means, though, is that, so for instance, and I'll just use me as if I was elected, if I was to propose an item and President Blakely was to say no, then the next meeting that I have would be the time that I would request an appeal and present that to the whole group. And then 3 board members at that time would then voice yay up or down on it. And so then you can have sort of the conversation. But what staff is suggesting is that you wouldn't just bring an item that hasn't been discussed with the board president. It would have to go through the board president process first, which aligns with CSBA's policy, and the appeal process is only the secondary recourse after the board president and the trustee. So in this case, President Blakely, as well as myself, would have discussed it. We would have went back and forth. Maybe we determine it's not something that we can place based off of the schedule. And then at the next board meeting, if I'm not satisfied, I would let the president know in the spirit of no surprises, and then mention it during items for future agenda. And that will remove staff completely out of the process so that it really falls with where it should be, which is the president and another trustee setting the president setting the agenda, and trustees working with the president, as opposed to the process we have now, which is email the superintendent presents it and tries to provide as much context, in most cases little context, as possible, because I'm not really sure at times what people want. So that's what staff is recommending based off of the process. And if that's the case, then we will bring it back at the next board meeting for it to get approved. And at this point, I know one item came into me, which I expressed like I would prefer for this item. So the president, in this case, which is still President Blakely, would work with the trustee to determine whether or not that needs to be placed on the agenda, or whoever the incoming president is, they can choose to do it that way. That sort of summarizes the research that we did, as well as sort of my cumulative 8 years of understanding the process and the sort of the ebbs and flows, and how we sort of got here.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. And I have a clarifying question. So the trustee talked to the board president, agrees, and then, it would just land on the agenda. the board president says, no, I really don't think this is the time for that, or it's not appropriate or whatever. And that then the trustee who wanted the item is frustrated and wants to have it revisited. And so it will get on the agenda. Like, is it, or they file the appeal or whatever the proper wording is. When it comes up on the agenda to discuss that, is there a label for the item, or is it kind of a mystery to everybody until we talk about it? Like, does it get agendized formally other than just, potential item?
It wouldn't get agendized formally. It would just come up for items for future agenda.
Okay.
And, the expectation would be either the president at the time would say, would sort of explain what's occurred and toss it over to the trustee. Or the trustee will simply say, I know that this, again, in honor of the process, President Blakely, you and I discussed this. I know you said that it's not something that we could do at this time. However, I still, as discussed after we went through the back and forth, I would like to appeal it, and then it would go to the board. And the board at that time is only making a determination as to whether or not it is something that they want to be placed on the agenda. And then it still falls to the president and then it's president and staff. So you and I would then figure out when we could place it. And in some cases, that may mean that we would have to look at something that either look at a slower month where there's a lot less items, or, we would ask, staff would ask a question of what can we remove in order to do this work?
But the item itself would not be listed with the content on the agenda, the one that was being appealed.
Correct.
Okay,
It would not.
That's just what I was looking for clarification.
Right. It's possible that, I mean, we've had this before where there have been items that we want to be discussed, but we also acknowledge like the schedule is really packed because of all the things we need to cover. And so people are fine with it coming up at a later time, or I think one year we had something that was kicked into the next year. And so then we have those conversations then. The trustee who's appealing doesn't have the ability to say, unless the board wants to put that in there, that it's next meeting. The trustee is, 3 trustees are saying, they want that item to be discussed, then, it's up to the president and superintendent or designee to figure out when that fits within the schedule. And that's consistent with board policy, the current board policy.
Thanks. I just was wondering whether it would be listed on the agenda or not. Chris or Trustee Chang.
Thank you. Question. So on this item in the board, I guess the summary for this, in the last part where they talk about like requester on the board discusses it for 2 minutes of the request, and board gives a thumb up, thumb down. That part there, that new language, I don't know if everyone sees that last part on the thing. Where does that fall into the process? Is that the part where if the board, if it's something's brought back to the board on appeal, that is at the point of a board member presents 2 minutes? Is that where, or I'm just trying to understand what this 2-minute presentation falls in the sequence of what you're suggesting.
Right. So in theory, you technically can't discuss an item that isn't agendized. So really what you're doing is appealing to the board for an item to be placed on the agenda. And the 2 minutes, I think, was something that we found in board policy. And so we just sort of, in different school districts board policy. And so it's something we captured that way you don't get into a Brown Act violation, because, you want to debate, should we be discussing this? Should we not be discussing this? And then going down a nuance of what that looks like. So it's just a reference point to say, we need to keep this as quick as possible, because it's not really about, all the extra stuff. It's about, I want this item on the agenda, thumbs up, thumbs down, we want to place it, not, we want to talk about it. And then, well, let's talk about all the other pieces that go with it, because that's really a Brown Act violation.
And just to clarify, you're saying this would happen as part of the appeal process? Is that
correct? Under items for future agendas, because you're not technically supposed to discuss the item. You're only supposed to propose an item. You don't have to have the time limit there. We can eliminate that.
So this is happening. The reason I'm asking is like, so the district policies that you've attached for MVLA and Los Altos School District, which are similar in what you're recommending, they, as practice and also in their board agendas, also have as a practice a place for board members to suggest future agenda items. It's always been a two-pronged process in the other districts. So I'm trying to understand. So, like, for example, when I look at MVLA on their board meeting tonight, on tonight's agenda, they have a part that says board suggestions for future board meetings. So are you suggesting that we do not have that process in our board, and that the only time board members preen something would be through the board president, and the only time they would speak about the item is if it's an appeal? I'm just trying to understand where this 2-minute presentation, and does that make sense why I'm confused on this? Like,
Yeah, so you have future items for agenda, like you have to agendize it, otherwise you can't even talk about it. Whatever their process is, I'm not really sure. I just looked at what the board policy is and we were scanning those. So we just put in, like, you know, in order to stay out of the Brown Act violation, just trying to put a time limit on there. But that's the appeal process, or the, hey, I want, you know, I've worked with the board president, I'm not satisfied, I've alerted the board president that I'm going to bring this up. That's when you would present it, and then that's when you get the thumbs up, thumbs down.
and that in your recommendation is that the board submits these requests 10 days before the board meeting. So this would be before we get our board packets, yes?
So that's the board agenda, the actual policy that we have in place already has the 10-day limit in there. So that's so that you're not putting something on the next agenda and you're not giving staff enough time to place it. So you're always essentially one meeting out from, which is really what it is, right? If you said it today, it wouldn't go on the next meeting. It wouldn't go on the 8th. It would go on the next meeting right after that. And sometimes that's, you know, because we publish our agendas the Friday before. So that's sort of around that 10-day process, but it would be the same that the public is afforded.
Thank you, Dr. Ralph.
Were there any other clarifying questions, trustees? Were there any members of the public wishing to speak on this item? If so, please raise your hand in Zoom, or please raise your hand in Zoom. Okay, I am not seeing anyone wishing to speak on this item. So trustees, if anyone has anything they'd like to say, Trustee Chang.
Thank you. I'm the one who wanted to discuss. I appreciate we're discussing this future agenda item process. I do have a different conclusion of how we ended up this place, you know, and Trustee Wheeler, correct me if I'm wrong historically, you know, past practice for our school districts was the same as what is existing practice for Los Altos and MVLA. And in that case, in the past practice was when possible, board members would submit it to the board president, who acts as a board secretary to facilitate a process. And there was always also an organic practice. And it's been a while since I've been to an MVLA meeting, and they have one tonight. So, but I assume on their item, when this says board suggestions for future agenda items, I'm assuming pretty safely that it's the same practice that we have had for years, which is there are going to be times after a board meeting where board members, not going to the content and material of the item, just discuss if something wants to be placed on a future agenda. My concern here is that that what we're suggesting here is taking out a organic process for the board to put items on the future agenda. You know, this idea of submitting things 10 days in advance to the board president, and then if the board president rejects it and then it comes to the board for discussion, seems to kind of take out some of this organic nature. I actually, you know, my concern was, I was hoping that we'd actually go back to previous practice. I think that this whole idea that came of our board retreat of us submitting items to the board president, to the superintendent, I'll speak frankly, I think it came from the board members worried about, you know, future agenda items that I was presenting, and feeling there was a comment on the board saying that they felt like future agenda items were being politicized. Something I disagree with. I mean, but I think this whole process came about in trying to take what they thought is a political nature out of the future agenda process. And I think what we're doing right now to take out a chance for our whole collective board to discuss future agenda items, I think it's I think it further politicizes it because it used to be in the practice that our board president was done in rotation, right? But once you put the agenda process entirely in the board president, then the ideology of that board president becomes a factor in the board choosing who that board president is, right? We have a previous board where 2 board members served their entire term without being board president. And I think that one reason that Trustee Caldonado was skipped over for being board president, despite serving as board vice president multiple times, was people factoring in an ideological nature to it. And if the board president acts as board secretary, facilitating us, there shouldn't be an ideological nature. But if we continue to view this as a strong board president philosophy, then we will continue to seek to, place people as board president that we ideologically agree with, which I think is a process I don't like. So I'm worried that this actually makes things more complicated. 10 days out, I think that in the past was you always try to get things to the board president, but something might come up you talk about in the meeting. I don't like this recommendation. I think I trust our board not to use the future agenda items as a political tool, but just as an organic place for us as colleagues to decide as elected representatives, what does the majority of us want to put on the calendar? And it's always in the past, the board president would then figure out maybe it's something that doesn't get talked about for months or until the end of the year. And that was a prerogative of the board secretary to find an efficient place for it. But I have major reservations about this. Thank you.
So just to respond to that, I mean, in my mind, it's politicization wasn't at all involved. The 10 days, I mean, you can count or whatever, but like so many times these items, at least during the term that I've been president this past year, have really kind of, for me, kind of come out of the blue. And the reason I was asking Dr. Rudolph whether they would be listed is like, would I have a chance to think about it ahead of time? But at least if you go to the board president with the item, one other trustee wouldn't be surprised at the meeting. And, if they agree, then it's kind of a non-issue. And it's just, if they aren't as excited about it, then you would come up with the item. So and we would talk about it. So I guess you'd already know that there's one person you need to win over if you're somebody bringing up an item. But I will say there have been 3 or 4 times that I can think of where we have gotten way too far, in my mind, down into the discussion of the merits and the factors that go into the merits and whatever, when we talked about this. And that for me is what I'm really more concerned about, boxing in isn't the right word, but sort of containing, so that we, if people say, okay, yeah, I'd like to discuss that, and 3 people say they want to, then it will. My concern was not the politicization. It was more the lengthy conversation. Then sometimes we talk 10, 15, 20 minutes about those. And so I worry about getting too far into the merits in that conversation. That was my concern. Trustee Conley.
Thank you, President Blakely. So, reading through the MVLA and the LASD policies, they basically have the same policy, and it is going through the board president, submitting at least a week in advance to the board president, and then it does allow for an appeal process to the board if the board president and superintendent deny a request. So I haven't watched their actual meetings to see how it happens, but that is for both of those districts, for both of our neighboring districts, that is what their policy says. And this doesn't seem very different.
Trustee Berman.
I found the same thing that, when I was digging around for even more policies, I found that there were several out there that didn't even have an appeal process. So my view of it was similar to President Blakely's, where, I think it was, I was sort of seeing it as maybe this is a more streamlined way of getting something on the agenda, but if it requires further discussion, perhaps because we're not sure about it, then there's a built-in opportunity to, add in a little extra time in the agenda item to bring it back to the whole board and then have a discussion about it. So for me, I was thinking, well, this could be, if that item makes sense, then we don't even need to take time during a board meeting to discuss it. We could just figure out where it's going to go. And, the president and that trustee can kind of work that piece out together potentially. So that was sort of my view of it. I hadn't quite gone down. Maybe it's naive of me to say this, to think that, I guess there is a way where it can become very political. I was just thinking that, something like this, if we're seeing it sort of across many school districts as the policy, must hopefully streamline the process a little bit.
And I will say that I have heard of some districts, I've never seen it, but where the president really does kind of take everything hostage, and that's why the appeal process. Dr. Rudolph?
Yep, so I just pulled up CSBA's language. That's actually the 10 days comes from them. And what it says is it's 10 days in order for it to go into the next agenda, which actually would be consistent with, you have 7 days to sort of go, and you got to remember that we post the agenda 3 days before. And then the second part of that policy says, if any item submitted less than 10 days before the scheduled meeting date may be postponed to a later meeting in order to allow sufficient time for consideration and research of the issue. So that's more about the adhering to the Brown Act and giving staff time, as well as the board president time, as opposed to something jumping on the agenda immediately. So, I mean, I'm just looking at the document that they have, which was included as part of the PDF. It's on the, or as part of the packet. It's on the second, it looks like it's on the second page, where they show sort of their language as to it. So that's not, staff didn't come up with that. That's straight from CSBA. So I would assume that that's just best practice from them.
And I think mechanically, when the board president, like, so let's say the requesting trustee, and I'll get, just to clarify, Chris, and then you can speak. Let's say somebody talks to you, talk to the president like on Tuesday, and the president had their weekly meeting with the superintendent on Monday, and the board meeting is going to be on Thursday. It's just like, I don't know if you need to come with a bright line 10 days, but you do want to have enough time for the president to think about it, talk to the soup, and then, react and put it on the agenda, or get back to the trustee and say, we like this item, but, we're looking at probably February or, whatever. So it's more just a practical thing. But
yeah, correct. I mean, if you think about how our current meeting, and every president has set a different day, but if you think about, so our next meeting is Tuesday. So in order to get, and then, if we had a board meeting after that, we are actually publishing on Friday. So so we meet on Tuesday. If staff has to prepare a report, and it's been done, it happened at the last board meeting, that request, or if it came within it, then there's a very short window for staff to get something done. And I think I'm not trying to argue that I know what CSBA is trying to say here, but my interpretation is that this is really put in line to respect staff's time and to make sure that they prepare. In fact, they even mention it, right? Like, the idea is to give staff enough time to prepare for sufficiently to get an item prepared for and posted on the agenda, as opposed to it just, every week the agenda is a fluid process and something's changing because we spend time working on these presentations. I mean, we have staff members who are working on presentations already for January. And so tossing something onto their plate is, and I don't think that's the intent, but just doesn't do staff justice. So I think that's why the 10 days is in there. Again, I can't attest as to why CSBA has it. That's exactly what was copied. But if you look at their language on page 2, that's simply what it says. And I think that's to give both trustees the opportunity to sort of adjust. And then you can see even right down there, it says if the board, that's where the appeal process comes in. That comes directly from CSBA also, and is born into fact of others. I can't attest to what other school districts do, but I think, again, I know at least in the 8 years that I've been here, the process has evolved. This is now its third iteration. And so whatever was done before, I'm not aware of. It's not my job to talk about the politics behind it. It's just simply to say what it appears to me, in reviewing the policies, our current approach is incongruent with what the first part of the policy says. And it appears that all the districts around us, as well as CSBA, really place the power between trustees and do not involve staff until it's a determination of when it can fit.
Chris, I know you've had your hand up a couple of times, and please.
Thank you, Dr. Ralph. I would really welcome finding out before this comes back to us as an action item is when Los Altos School District and MVLA have on their existing agendas item that says this is a time for board to discuss non-agendized future items. I'd welcome us finding out what they mean by that. So I would be totally in for us. So MVLA and Los Altos have exactly nearly the same language. I would be 100% in support of our district following the same practice that Los Altos and the high school district are using. So if the high school district and Los Altos, if they don't have a place for, if they're in line with their process, I think it makes sense for us to align with them. It would help the community have to know one less thing. But if we discover that the Los Altos School District and the high school district actually still continue the old practice of future agenda items being exactly what that is, and that we are then become the outlier and having a little more of a kind of internal process, then I would urge us to pause and think about that. So if our recommendation is to do exactly both in practice and policy what Los Altos and MVLA, I think that's a great idea, because I think that we've become too complicated. In the past, when future items were brought up, if board members were wanting to discuss it, which gets us into the Brown Act violation, that was a sign that that was an item that should be agendized, right? It was like, we are discussing things rather than agendizing things. And in the past, it would be, if there was 3 board members that wanted to agendize it, it was still totally up to the board president and the district staff to figure out when do they have the bandwidth for it. So the past practice of having the board decide what's on future agenda items, in addition to a board president, of course, having the prerogative to do that as well, didn't mean that the district staff had to drop everything to agendize it. It just meant that, the collective board wanted something, and then it was still up to the board president and the superintendent to find where it would be appropriate, efficient. The area that we've had problems in the district as a past is it was confusing for the community on when they could present an item. We've had multiple different controversial issues in the past where board community members weren't clear how do they get something onto our agenda. And I think that still continues to be an unclear process, right? It's like, is it that if a community member submits a request that it all, and they submit it with the right time frame, that it's automatically on the agenda? And if that's the case, then is it that board members will require a majority of the board to get things on the agenda, but a community member, if they submit things far enough in advance, their item goes on the agenda? It just that was something in the past that was kind of brought questions, right? I don't know if we have any more clarity, Dr. Rudolph, on that. So is it the practice that board members will need a majority to get their item on, and community members of community, as long as they submit things within the appropriate date timeline, their items automatically go on the board? Thanks, Dr. Rudolph.
No, the policy reads that the board president makes a determination as to whether or not this is something that falls to staff or is something that falls to the jurisdiction of the board. But they too have to submit it within 10 days. And then the board president has the ability to say yay or nay. And so that process is the way our policy reads, which actually, that's consistent with everybody else. It's the only thing that's incongruent is the second part, which is you've bypassed the board president altogether, and it's just a vote of trustees. And so, again, my reading is, and it aligns with what CSBA says, is that the power lies with the board president, to make the determination. And to be honest, I think the conversation that you want to have is really with the board president. So I think that's where it all lies. And let me just give a good example of this, right? So Trustee Blake, any of the trustees, so 4 out of 5 of you have been a president at some point. And so, and Chris, I know when I came on, you were headed out. So I can't speak to working with you because Kevin Skelly was working with you at that time. But in this case, at least with the other 3, oftentimes when the conversation came up from the public, the president would say, I think this is a good item for the board to discuss, or I really feel like this is staff. And there would be a back and forth to make a determination. And then finally, the board president would say yay or nay that this is going to go on or not go on. And so that approach seems to work. It doesn't automatically give, and I think that's consistent with all school districts, as well as city council. It doesn't necessarily give someone the power to just place an item on there. And then for the trustees, I think, again, my experience is that this has evolved over time. And it really is about sort of where the board is. I think y'all are definitely a lot more cordial and have the ability to talk to each other. So I'm not arguing that your points aren't valid. I just think that this has evolved so much that we're sort of at this place where we're just trying to bring it back in line. And then what I did when I was looking at this is I tried to take into account this exact same thing, right? Which is someone feels that they really should have an item placed on the agenda, but doesn't feel like the board president heard their appeal and believes that there is a board majority. It gives them the ability to bring it up at the next meeting to say, this is what I really would like to investigate this, and the board can discuss and sort of place it on the agenda. And then it follows that same process. So I was trying to be honest, I was trying to keep in spirit of exactly what you're saying, which is let the board president and the trustee talk. You don't feel like you've been heard, take it to the full board, get 3 votes, and it's placed on the agenda so that, and what I would say is that no power or no voice of a trustee has been diluted and is only, to what you brought up before, at the whim of the board president. It is really like, if after talking that it isn't going to work, then I believe that I want my voice to be heard. And so if you think about the process right now, so let's say you did it today, you and Laura talked, Laura said no. By the next board meeting, you have the ability to put it right on the agenda and say, I want this to be on as an item, and you get the thumbs up or the thumbs down. And that sort of mirrors the exact same process that we sort of have. It's just, to be honest, which I think is really the right thing, it removes me from the process and allows you the opportunity to discuss this with people who are really the ones who are making the decision, as opposed to, and not that I don't mind doing it, but emailing me a statement, me reading the statement. And what I have seen since we've had this process in place, multiple trustees feel like the essence of what they have asked for has not been captured. And so because that hasn't been captured, you all then open up into this larger dialogue about what's actually being said. When if you just work with President Blakely and you didn't get the resolution you wanted, you could do the exact same thing, but you never have to email me and worry about me being involved. It really falls to y'all.
Chris or Trustee Chang? You're on mute.
Thank you for Dr. Ruff for that explanation. I'm just trying to understand because I know I was off the board for a few years. On the board policy in our bylaws, when it says that a member of the public may request a matter within the jurisdiction of the board, in the past, we were always under the impression that if they requested it, we would have to put it on the board agenda at some point. Is the interpretation now that if the public formally submits a request, it's within the board president's prerogative to reject a community item?
Yeah, so a couple of policy updates ago, so that, again, this has been updated multiple times. The policy actually did read that if you request it, it will be placed on the item. It would be placed on the board agenda. And so, former trustee Nelson, when he was off the board, he requested an item. It followed, and it met the 10-day rule, and was he presented his topic. And that was consistent. And then through this iteration in this update, we saw that the board, CSBA, actually recommended that the board should have a discussion about, is this something that is more administrative, or is this something that is more of a board policy? And at any given time, the board president, can say, as well as trustees can say, I really believe that this is a policy matter, not an administrative matter, and I would like to see it on the agenda. And so that determination is really placed by the board president, as opposed to, it just automatically going on. I think that's just, that seems to be more consistent. So that one was maybe 2 policies ago, and it's been changed for a while now.
And last, just quick question, Dr. Ruff. I don't know if you would be able to find out from our neighboring superintendents from MVLA and Los Altos on their current agendas, when they say this is a place for the board to discuss future agenda items. Can we find out what they mean by that? I mean, I know I could email our colleagues on other boards too, but I think it'd be useful. I fully support us going back. I fully support us going to what MVLA and Los Altos do. And I just want to find out what that is and fully, because they have their policy, which I support us adopting their policy. I also just want to find out what they mean when they continue to have in their agenda ongoing item of, this is a place for a board to discuss future agenda items. If we can find that out, I mean, like this would be an easy slam dunk for us to align ourselves with the other districts.
I'm looking to y'all to direct me on which way you want to go. So either I bring back a policy or I can do more work. I would just say, and I put this in an email to a trustee who requested an item. I don't want to, until this matter is sort of settled, I don't think that it's fair for me to propose future agenda items, because I think you all are trying to wrestle with this. So as long as that understanding is clear, if you all want me to call them and reach out to Nellie, Dr. Myers, as well as Mr. Gallagher, and Sandra, I don't have a problem with doing it. I want to be clear that I believe you all need to settle this issue so that you feel comfortable with the process, and that, I guess what I'm trying to do is remove me from being a part of the process that really involves the 5 of y'all.
Well, my view is, I'm comfortable with the proposal, and I liked having the appeal piece in there. So, and I'm happy to speak to my colleagues, but you may want to do your direct inquiry. It doesn't feel to me like it's fair to put it on Dr. Rudolph here. It's really us reaching out to our colleagues on other boards. I think, you're not able to go to the CSBA conference, right? Because there'll be lots of people we could ask how they do it. But I'm happy to reach out to local people that I know. I don't know how others feel. Trustee Berman, Trustee Conley, Trustee Wheeler. Trustee Conley.
Thank you, President Blakely. I mean, at the end of the day, there's so much consistency across these policies from so many other districts. And it is based off of a CSBA policy. I have no problem with it because it has the appeal process in it. So I'm interested in just moving forward with a policy based on best governance practices that's used statewide.
Thank you, Trustee Berman.
I also don't see a problem with this the way it's written here. I mean, I would be curious to collect that information just to hear what our other surrounding school boards are doing. I'm happy to also do that research on my end so that Dr. Rudolph and his staff do not have to do that. But just for my own information, yeah, I definitely see the benefits and sort of streamlining and aligning to some best practices too. But I do want to take that into consideration when we make a decision.
So the next steps would be that we will do our independent diligence, and I would be in favor of putting this as written unless we find any major deviations onto the next agenda for approval in December. But are the rest of you comfortable with that? Trustee Berman? Oh, your hand is still up from before. Okay. Okay.
All right, so just to be clear, so staff will amend the process to include the language that is there and bring it back to the next board meeting. And then this essentially, if you're fine with it, you all can start the process now. So any trustee to get something possibly placed on the December 8th agenda would just reach out to President Blakely and have the discussion there. And in the event that you know, you feel like, no, it's not going to get placed on the agenda, then on the December 8th, you have the ability to propose it as an item to be placed on the next agenda or a subsequent, I mean, it doesn't have to be next, but to place an item on a future agenda. That's at least how I see it, so that, you know, the process, because I know there may be topics that you may want to discuss, so that it keeps the process moving. But at least I want to make sure that my understanding of where you all is clear. Or the alternative is we just simply wait until the policy's been updated, and then you would go into this new approach.
Trustee Conley.
I mean, I think we have to wait until the policy is actually voted on to change the policy. So until we vote on the policy, I don't think we can implement a new policy.
But as a practical matter, you could talk to me, and if I say it's fine, although I don't know, the lame duck, maybe that doesn't.
Correct, because it's not a Brown Act violation for two trustees to discuss it. So, you know, and the board president does have the ability to set the agenda, which is what you vested for the board president. So it's not incongruent with the first part of the policy. It's the second part that we're just removing and updating.
Trustee Berman, you had your hand up for a moment.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I agree with Trustee Conley. I think that my sense is that we should wait until we formalize it and approve it before we go on with this new way of doing it.
Trustee Chang, do you concur, or do you? Okay, you're good. Okay.
Okay, so staff will bring back another policy for approval. Is it okay that we waive first reading and just simply move it to an action item that will be placed on consent?
Okay.
Trustee Chang.
Thank you. President Blake, I did you hear that President Blake was like, unless we're hearing that there is actually like what we're thinking about doing is out of spirit, out of line with what MVLA and Los Altos, then I feel like it's worthy of discussion. But if we and Trustee Blake, I mean, we all kind of in some way easily can see that our colleagues even tomorrow, right? So it's like, if we don't hear any deviation from what we're suggesting and what they do in practice, then I'm all for putting this on consent. But if we do hear back from MVLA and Los Altos that like what they do in practice actually is a little different in spirit of what we're going to be doing operationally, then I think it's worth us discussing. So like, perhaps I just maybe like trust President Blakely, if you don't hear anything, then put it on consent. But if you hear something different, I just urge us to bring it back for discussion.
I'm comfortable with that. Trustee Conley, Trustee Wheeler, you okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay,
And
thank
so,
you, everyone. Oh, sorry.
Board President Blakely, before we go on to our last item, can we take a break?
Sure. It's 8:29. Let's be back by like 8:34.
Okay.
Does that work?
Mhm.
Dr. Rudolph, are you ready to resume?
I was just sitting here.
Okay, thank you. So at 8:34, we're resuming from our break and moving along to item 6C, review and discussion, the successor and officer positions. Dr. Rudolph, were you going to say anything?
Yep. So just, again, this is another thing that's sort of evolved over my time. I think every Trustees have had different approaches to sort of make this work. Trustee Chang sort of alluded to, and I think Trustee Wheeler has the most, as our local historian, has probably the longest tenure of understanding this process. It has evolved from time to time. It hasn't always been a clear succession from one position to the next. And then I think some of us would like for it to be a position from to move up and down. But over the time, we have come to create this process, unless you come to sort of an agreement that it doesn't need to follow this, where people will simply state their intention for which position they want. And then they sort of every 2 years or every year, you have this same conversation in November before the board organization meeting. And I think, at least again, speaking to my experience, this was put in place so that individuals would not be surprised about people's intentions, and also gives trustees the ability to discuss it with each other about the roles. So, staff will keep adding this every November until we're instructed otherwise. However, if you decide today that you just want it to be a natural succession or something else, then staff will simply stop placing it on here. But at least for now, we continue to put it on there so that you can have the conversation with each other.
Thank you, Dr. Rudolph. Any clarifying questions, trustees? Okay, I'm going to open it up to members of the public to comment on this item. If there's anyone who wishes to comment on this item. Oh, Trustee Wheeler, did you have a clarifying question?
No, I'm waiting. I'm in line for comment.
Okay, since we're all together on my same Zoom screen, it throws me off. Okay, so if there are any members of the public other than trustees wishing to speak on this item, would you please raise your hand in Zoom? Okay, I am not seeing any, so I'm going to open it up to trustees with Trustee Wheeler first.
Yeah, I want to say that I think this is the perfect year to talk about this because there is no natural progression, so-called natural progression, other than we have a vice president. So often, not always, but often the vice president goes on to be elected as president the next year. It's not a guarantee, but it often happens. And this is the year that we don't have a natural person to come in as the new vice president or the new clerk, because I have the position of clerk and I'm going off the board. So any of you, except me, and including incoming trustee Lambert, could be vice president, and any of you could be clerk. So I think this is a really good year to have this discussion. And I also, I'll also say, and I say this every year, and when I'm off the board, you can, even this year, you could say, we disagree with you. But I think it's a strength of this board that we have personal selections, that it's not an automatic progression. And I think some of us have been around long enough that we remember when this subject actually came before the Mountain View City Council, I don't know, 15 years ago, something like that, where the council, who almost always had an automatic succession, decided that the person who was in line is not somebody that they thought would be the best choice to be the next mayor. And they changed what they were going to do. And the skies didn't fall. And, a lot of people thought, that showed good, good protection of the public. So one of the things I have learned in my many years of being on the board is being board president is more than just somebody who runs the meeting during that year. There's somebody who there's a progression, from certainly from vice president to president, but there's a progression to thinking about, what about, 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 years in the future? What are the agenda items that are going to come up? So, and, it's some trustees are, have better knowledge bases or, better ways of, dealing with the board or dealing with the public or dealing with experts about items that will be coming up in the future. So it isn't just, Laura Blakely could run a meeting, Chris Chang could run a meeting, I could run a meeting. There's a depth to it that I didn't appreciate when I first got on the board. And the last thing I want to say, and then, I don't want to take up too much time, is people in our community look to the board for, leadership and, how well they think the schools are running. So it's not just, does someone's ego want to place themselves as president, or is this, who's the right president for, the next time? So, and this is where typically, if we can say anything's typically, I would say, or someone would say, hey, I nominate Laura Ramirez Berman to be our president for next year. And, other people would say, well, I'd like to be considered also. And that has happened. We've had elections for the office of president. But my personal and professional opinion is that Laura Ramirez Berman is the right person at the right time. She's shown a lot of growth during her first 2 years of being on the school board. I would like to see her become president if she is willing to do it. And then, I leave it up to you. I am out of the picture regarding vice president and clerk.
Thank you, Trustee Wheeler. Trustee Chang, you've got your hand up.
Thank you. I fully support Trustee Berman being board president. I think I am confident that this entire board is among the most, knowledgeable and experienced board on education issues of I don't think of any board that has the deep pool that this board has. So, anyone on this board would do a fantastic job eventually serving. Really excited to see Trustee Berman be board president. I would really like to see, I know he's not here, but I would like to see, first, I would welcome Bill Lambert to have a part in this conversation. And I think Bill Lambert would be a really good vice president. I think that, I believe that because everyone here is so able to do the job beyond just running the meeting, but just so experienced in their background education and the history in this district that, that it's an advantage to the board to have multiple people have that experience of having that close relationship with the superintendent and learning, so that I actually think it's an effective board when you have multiple people rotate through having been board president. So excited to see Trustee Berman be board president. And I think it'd be good for Bill Lambert to get in the process to have that experience and learn what's going on in the district and learn the role by being watching Trustee Berman. And because otherwise, it really did bother me that Trustee Caldonado went hired. There was nothing about his demeanor would have made him a bad board president. Yet, despite him serving as vice president, and despite the fact that he expressed multiple times wanting to be board president, and I think that would have helped him learn to be a better trustee because he would have had the experience of working with the superintendent from that perspective. I think each trustee having that experience makes us as a board a better board. So I would welcome us not dodge people, but then and I just hope that doesn't that's not the practice we adopt, because then it is an ideological practice. And because in the city council, it is the exception. Paul did the same thing. It is a rarity when they don't go by sequence. So the norm isn't that they every year choose, it it's assumed that Allison Hicks will be the next mayor. It is what I would welcome us having that exception, but what they use as an exception has become our norm. So I just put that out there.
Thank you, Trustee Chang. Trustee Conley, you've got your hand up.
Thank you, President Blakely. I also support Vice President Berman becoming our president next year. And I have to say, Vice President Berman is one of my most valued thought partners in the work that we do as trustees. It's a really hard position, and the work that we've done on the school site plans together, for example, and just, you know, when I need a Brown Act buddy, she is definitely one of the people that's top of mind for me. I would be very interested in serving as vice president next year in order to partner with her as she is president, and possibly having future trustee and former trustee Lambert being our clerk, and then rotating through that way. Usually when someone is elected to the board for the first time, they start out at clerk. And I know he had sort of a gap term, I think we can call it. He had a gap term. So it's not that he's new to the board, but gelling with a new board does take time. And so I think there's value in starting out as clerk and then moving up. But I also want to see through the work that we started. So my year as president was 2021, which was the heart of the pandemic. So I was very thankful to be in the position I was, but I haven't had kind of a normal board president year where we could really focus on the work of academics and social emotional learning and all of these other things. It was much more about navigating a very scary process and health decisions, which is also why I'm interested in serving again eventually in that role. And so, you know, it's up to the board to decide, though, of course. I think everyone here is very strong.
Thank you, Trustee Conley. Trustee Berman.
Well, first of all, thank you for the vote of confidence tonight. There are big shoes to fill with all of the presidents before me. I also feel incredibly proud to work alongside this very capable board. You know, I see myself as, you know, one of five. We are a collective working in a very focused manner, selfless manner, to improve student outcomes. And that's the most important thing for me above all else, is improving student outcomes and creating the conditions that will help our students be successful. So Trustee Wheeler, thank you for giving me your vote of confidence in your nomination here. It's a position I'm definitely open to exploring.
Thank you, Trustee Berman. I guess everybody's had a chance to share their interests for next year and talk about the process. I'm all super supportive of Trustee Berman, but I also think that we are a strong board, and we are each, you know, 1/5 of the board, and, you know, proud to serve with all of you. And I don't necessarily subscribe to the lockstep notion, but I'm open, and you know, I think working together we will come to the, you know, a collaborative choice of who our leadership should be, and that we'll continue to work together effectively with students first and foremost in our minds. Trustee Chang.
President Blakely, a quick request of, could you reach out to Bill Lambert and just get his thoughts on the process? And because I recognize, you know, it's he probably would want to have some part, because he'll be voting on this, right? And it's the organization, it's the leadership structure. I don't think I don't know. I won't speak for him, but I just think that we're having a conversation without the incoming trustee. Which, if this was a year where there wasn't a change in the board, it would not matter if the 5 people were the same. But I don't know if would he be willing just to like include him in the process, since we've discussed it without him.
So yeah, I've just noticed he's been sitting in on almost all of our meetings, but I don't see him here this evening. But I would imagine he's got some kind of a conflict and will be listening to the meeting, so he will hear this discussion, and he will be participating in our organizational meeting on Saturday, December 10th. And I don't think we're debating we don't, this is just like review and discussion right now. So we're not changing the process. So if we were going to change the process, that would be in the coming year. At least that's my understanding. So this is the process we're in now, and that's not going to change. And he's certainly in the mix, as all 5 trustees, once they're sworn in, would be. And I'm looking forward to working with him. Trustee Wheeler.
Yeah, so incoming trustee Lambert emailed me yesterday or something like that, saying that he was sorry that he would not be able to attend this meeting tonight because, as you note, he has been diligently attending our meetings so that he would be prepared from day one to step right in and work with this board. But he said that he had a work-related meeting that he couldn't miss tonight. So, and that's why he's not in attendance tonight.
Thanks, I'd assumed as much, but fortunately we are recording. We got past our technical difficulties, right? So, but thanks for the input, Trustee Chang, and all the rest of you. I value your comments and perspective, and like I said, look forward to working with you. We will miss you, Trustee Wheeler, but we get you one more meeting. So, okay, is there anything further to say on this item, or shall we move on to board updates? Item 7, and Trustee Wheeler, before I open it up to the floor, you had mentioned that you had something that you wanted to say and that I should remind you.
Yeah, I do. I recently heard about this, and I'm sorry I didn't know about it earlier, and maybe some of you did before me. But our school community lost a giant in the last month or so. Juan Aranda, longtime trustee from Wissman School District, and can't remember if he was in Mountain View Wissman School District. But anyway, longtime community activist, community helper, leader, highly respected in our community. He died recently. He was, fairly elderly. He had moved from Mountain View to the Central Valley a couple years ago with his wife, Maria, so that they could, get a little break from Mountain View, I think, and, cash in on his house. But I'd like to recognize him tonight, and I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for former trustee Juan Aranda.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. And he also, apart from his education endeavors, and he was a longtime salsa dance instructor at the community center. And so I will always think of him teaching everybody how to dance. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Were there any other board updates that you, Trustee Wheeler, or anyone else wanted to share?
Yeah, I have one more, and I keep looking at Trustee Conley because she often has, just really, deep and high level updates. I have an update. I went to I submitted my board updates to Ms. Villalba, but I went to an American Leadership Forum meeting, convening of education leaders a couple days ago, and former Santa Clara County Board of Education trustee Leon Beachman was in attendance there, and he's always excellent to listen to. Lots of intelligence and deep knowledge of education and students. He retired from that board a couple of years ago, but he's still providing input. Anyway, so he was at this meeting, And we were talking about social emotional learning, and what should we be providing in schools, and how can we encourage young people to become teachers, in the future. Because said that, when he was young, it was considered to be a, very prestigious profession, and it still is considered to be prestigious, but you don't hear about young people, a lot of young people saying, hey, I want to become a teacher. And he said, he brought up something, and I don't know if we could do this, or we could talk to the high school district or what, but at least have this in your head. He said when he was young, in his school, they had a club called Future Teachers of America. And, to just plant that idea in young people's minds that this is something that you can, this is a path, a professional path that you can, work towards and be around other people and, get some help about, how do you do this? I thought that was a really nice idea, that I like the idea of Future Teachers of America.
Thank you, Trustee Wheeler. We've got lots of clubs at our schools, and maybe that's a new offering. Trustee Conley, you had your hand up also.
Thank you. Well, I just wanted to remind everyone here and the public that the California School Board Association's annual education conference is coming up the week after Thanksgiving break. And I think usually we have a majority of our trustees able to attend. Will that be the case this year?
It will.
We have President Blakely, Vice President Berman. Trustee Wheeler, are you planning to attend this year? No, okay.
Oh, I thought you were going to be there. I'm sorry. Then it's, yeah.
Somebody reached out to Bill Lambert.
I had reached out to Bill Lambert, but I think Nancy said, oh, Dr. Rudolph.
He plans on attending. He has a tight schedule, but he said he would make it work. So
wonderful.
We're scheduling stuff for him.
Wonderful. So that's such a wonderful place to learn about best practices across the state, to get kind of a brush up on good governance practices as well as a board, and to get to know some of the other trustees from our area that you might not otherwise get to see. And then another piece of news to put on trustees' calendars is that the legislative brunch that the Santa Clara County School Boards Association runs is scheduled for February 25th this coming year from 9 to 1 p.m. It's going to be a hybrid event. So you can go in person to the hub at Stanford Research Park, or you can Zoom in. But it's nice to get that on your calendar early, because it's an opportunity to hear from state legislators who impact our county, and then also county supervisors as well. So I wanted you to mark your calendars if you can. And then finally, the Santa Clara County School Board, the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors is supposed to be hearing in December a update on a study that's been done about internet access across the county. So where households and small businesses are unserved or underserved, and to bring a plan about how to move forward in creating a public broadband utility. This is going to be the first time that there is a price tag on this. And so I really encourage our board and also members of the public to pay attention when it comes up, because the state and federal funding that is currently available is probably not going to be enough money in and of itself to fund the broadband needs entirely for the county, in which case we are going to need to encourage our county board of supervisors to contribute whatever gap funding is needed, or to find partnerships to meet that gap. So it's going to be an important meeting, and I hope everyone is able to show up and give voice when it comes around.
Thank you, Trustee Conley. Assuming you're able, if you notice when it's on the agenda, if you monitor that. will you alert us?
If you are on the Digital Equity Coalition's email list, we will send out an update as soon as the agenda is released, with information about how to give public comment, how to write in, etc.
Thank you very much. That the work that you and the coalition do is so important to our families, and we really appreciate your advocacy. Any other board updates? Okay, we will move along then to item 8, future items for future agendas. And Dr. Rudolph, did we have any for this meeting?
No, as I stated earlier, I did get one, but I expressed that I believe the board needs to resolve this issue first before, so that it doesn't feel as if an item is being pushed through without the board having clarity. So because we had the discussion, I can forward that, or the trustee that sent it in can just reach out to you and the two of y'all can have the conversation. Because that still is in spirit of the board policy, or I think, wait, let me take that back. My notes say, wait until the next meeting. And so on December 8th, y'all can have, after December 8th, you as presidents, because you're still setting that agenda until the organizational meeting, which is 2 days later, well, can work from there.
Okay, I'm comfortable with that. I thought that we said we were not going to do the new thing until, does that work for you, trustees? And I'm happy to speak to whomever was suggesting the item.
I guess I was confused. I thought we can't actually carry through a new board policy until we've voted on it and put it in place. So I'm not sure why we would just pause all agenda proposals until that policy is in place when we already have an existing policy.
That's what I thought the majority of you had said earlier. I don't necessarily view them as inconsistent entirely, but
If you want me to present it, I can pull it up. I'm simply saying that this item was requested to be agendized. And because you requested it to be agendized, and you have had a very vigorous debate about how you want to move forward, I don't think that it's, this is, I can pull up the email and I can read it, but I don't think that it's in the spirit of the board discussing and debating how you want to move forward. And then for me to turn around and to propose a new item when you all wanted to clarify how this goes. Now, again, I'm more than welcome to present. I just don't feel that's in the spirit. That's why we brought this up as quickly as we could. So I just don't believe that that's in this. I think it's disingenuous to turn around and do something under old policy when you all had the intention of discussing and making a change. But the first part of the board policy still stands, which is that the board president is the one who makes a determination, and it is not a Brown Act violation for a trustee and the board president to make a determination as to whether or not an item can be placed on the agenda, and the board president does have the ability to place an item. So, that's how I sort of viewed it. My interpretation could be wrong. I'm just simply saying it does feel a little uncomfortable for me to be placed in the middle of a discussion that you are trying to have, and then to turn around and do something different.
Trustee Berman had her hand up, and now Trustee Chang has his up. I don't know if you guys wanted to weigh in.
Well, I think after hearing Dr. Rudolph, I think I would defer to President Blakely right now to, decide if she feels comfortable. My thought is, if you want to make the call, do you feel comfortable sharing this agenda item? Do you prefer that we wait?
And Trustee Chang, you also had your hand up.
Oh, I just want just to expedite this. It was my item. I'll send it to President Blakely. There is that practice as as Superintendent Rudolph was saying that's there. So I will submit it to you and withdraw the request to have us as a board discuss this right now.
That works. Happy to take a look and talk to you about it. Okay, that I believe is the last thing we have. Item 9, the future board meeting dates. So our next meeting, and Trustee Wheeler's last meeting is will be December 8th. And we'll have our organizational meeting then at the beginning, just before our board retreat on Saturday morning, 10th. And the January dates are laid out there. And we're looking on the scheduling of the meeting on December 8th. I think Dr. Rudolph and I have talked about it. We'll probably start that meeting a little earlier and would like to open it up for members of the public to attend in person. At least that portion of the meeting will ask that everyone wear masks. And then we will take a break after we've properly celebrated Trustee Wheeler, and we'll have some refreshments. So I'm hoping that that's okay. We're not making the decision of whether our meetings are going to be physically attended in person. This is more like what we did when we had the new teachers sworn in, and then we'll take that up. The next president will take that up, the meeting format. So, but just wanted to alert people. You know, we'll have to wear our holiday gear in honor of you, Trustee Wheeler. So, okay, well, thank you, everyone. I know I'll see some of you before the holiday, but if there are any of you that I don't see, and all you staff and members of the public, I hope everybody has a wonderful Thanksgiving week and a relaxing, restful time, and stays happy and healthy. And at 9:06, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.